Hi, this is Raphael Mudge. Welcome to Advanced Threat Tactics, a course on adversary simulations and red team operations. Advanced Threat Tactics is split up into 9 parts. First, we're going to cover how to stand up infrastructure for long-term operations and how to organize your infrastructure and how to organize your team. We're then going to talk about, in part 3, how to get a foothold in a modern enterprise with a targeted spear phishing campaign. Once we have that foothold, we're going to go on to parts 4 and 5 to focus on post-exploitation, privilege escalation, and how to harvest credentials and password hashes. We'll then talk about how to abuse trust relationships for lateral movement and how to tunnel different types of tools through a compromised system with Cobalt Strike. Finally, we'll wrap up this course by talking about 2 advanced but very important topics, and that's malleable command and control, which lets you change Cobalt Strike's indicators to look like another actor on the wire, and we're going to talk in great depth about evasion in a modern context with Cobalt Strike. Throughout this course, we're going to take advantage of several tools. Obviously, we're going to use Cobalt Strike. We're going to work from Kali Linux. Here and there, the Metasploit framework will make an appearance. We will also use offensive PowerShell capability, such as PowerSploit and PowerTools. And during the evasion lecture, I will show you how to take advantage of the Veil Evasion framework with Cobalt Strike as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with part 1 of Advanced Threat Tactics, Operations. In this lecture, we're going to introduce Cobalt Strike and talk about some of its history and what it's built for. I will also talk about how to stand up a team server and connect a Cobalt Strike client to it. And we'll talk about Cobalt Strike's model for distributed operations. There, I will also give you best practices for organizing your Cobalt Strike team server infrastructure and organizing your team into different roles. Finally, we'll wrap up this lecture by talking about how Cobalt Strike handles logging and reporting for its adversary simulation and red team operation use cases. I mentioned before that Cobalt Strike is a platform for red team operations and adversary simulations. This thread of work has a history of about 5 years for me. My work with Cobalt Strike started with Armitage. Armitage is an open source front end for the Metasploit framework that allows a red team to collaborate. When I built Armitage, I made it for cyber defense exercises where college students were the training audience. I didn't have much intention to see it used in production. But the tool was well responded to, and some of the collaboration ideas seemed like they would actually be handy in other contexts. But there was a problem. The Metasploit framework by itself is not well suited for use against a mature enterprise. I thought I could correct some of these problems and build a product in the process that would support my continued work on these tools. And that led to Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike's model was to augment the Metasploit framework to execute targeted attacks and evade defenses. Okay? And I did this augmentation by building on top of Armitage. Cobalt Strike 2 came out in recognition of a market demand for what are called adversary simulations. These are basically red team operations that focus on emulating the actions of a specific actor. Cobalt Strike 2 took steps to address this need with its malleable C2 technology. And that's a technology that allows you to change Cobalt Strike's wire indicators to look like another actor. Cobalt Strike 2 also saw a shift towards low and slow post-exploitation with Cobalt Strike's beacon payload. I worked on Cobalt Strike 2 since July of 2014. Cobalt Strike 3 came out September 2015, and Cobalt Strike 3 is a standalone platform for red team operations and adversary simulations without direct dependency on the Metasploit framework. So what do I mean by red team operations and adversary simulations? Well, let's start with red team operations. My definition of red team operations is to emulate a representative actor to provide a holistic assessment of a security program. Okay? Cobalt Strike supports red team operations by giving you the tools to stand up infrastructure for long-term operations. Okay? Cobalt Strike is very unique in its capability to manage distributed infrastructure with one client. And you'll see that as we go through this course. Cobalt Strike also helps you execute a full scope type attack with its user-driven attacks and social engineering tools. Okay? These tools are designed to help you get a foothold in a modern environment. Cobalt Strike also has several hooks to enable you to get past different types of defenses you'll encounter. Malleable C2 is one example of a Cobalt Strike evasion technology. Cobalt Strike also gives you the tools to work low and slow and conduct your post-exploitation and lateral movement actions. And you'll see Cobalt Strike's model for asynchronous post-exploitation and lateral movement as we go through this course. What about adversary simulations? An adversary simulation is an assessment that emulates an advanced threat actor to train security operations and incident response staff. You may be asking, how do I do that with Cobalt Strike? Well, you can use Malleable C2 to change the network indicators in Cobalt Strike's beacon payload to look like another actor. You can use Cobalt Strike's user-driven attacks or pair Cobalt Strike's beacon with an exploit from another toolset to approximate the actor's access vector. You can also use Cobalt Strike's flexibility to try and mimic the adversary's post-exploitation and lateral movement techniques. One of my favorite things to do is read threat intelligence reports, look at how the actor likes to work, and say, this is how I would do it with Cobalt Strike.